Tonight, the information superhighway and one of its main thoroughfares, an online network called Internet.
Violence at NBC, GE.com. I mean,
well, Allison should know. What do you
is
say
Internet
about Allison?
anyway?
Back in the late 90s, the internet was still an incredibly new thing. A lot of people were excited about all the possibilities it had, but a lot of people were also just confused. As cool as the new technology was, there wasn't a lot you could do with it in those early years. There were no streaming services like Netflix or Hulu, and community content sites like YouTube wouldn't exist for years to come either. There wasn't really any content for you to consume online, no movies, TV shows, or videos you could fill your day binging. All you could do was maybe read the news or look up stock prices. But as the years went on, more and more people kept choosing to buy packages with their phone provider that signed them up for the internet as well. However, if it wasn't the premise of all of these things we have today that got them hooked on the internet, then what was it? Well, in spite of all of its faults, the early internet did still allow people to do one really cool new thing: make connections with other individuals out there. Probably the best example of something that personified the early internet was RuneScape. RuneScape was a huge video game in the early to mid 2000s, the #1 ranked game on miniclip.com no less. For anyone unfamiliar with it, RuneScape has really basic graphics, it also contains incredibly repetitive gameplay, and some of the goals you may want to reach will take an insane level of dedication and time that you'll just be wasting to get a number to tick up to 99. But people played the hell out of this game because it had one of the coolest communities there was. RuneScape was built as a game that would be easy for anyone to run no matter what computer they had, because in its early years it was run just through internet browsers. That meant that all sorts of people from different walks of life would play it, creating a really diverse community. It was an MMO, so of course one of the cool things about it, like all other MMOs, is you might randomly bump into another player who's only a stranger at first, but they could turn into a lifelong best friend. But there were also all sorts of other in-game communities that you could get involved with. There were tons of different fan sites you could find, there was also in-game clans you could join, and eventually a content creation scene popped up with all sorts of internet celebrities that you might freak out over if you saw them in-game. Eventually there was a huge community event started in-game called The Gathering, where every big-name RuneScape player would show up at the same place on the same server, so fans could all follow them and hang out together talking about whatever. The thing that really made RuneScape so special wasn't the gameplay itself, it was the ability to connect with other people online and make new friends from all over the world. And that emphasis on social connection is really what the internet as a whole was about in those early years. There wasn't a lot to do, but there were tons of different places you could go and meet new people. It didn't matter if nobody in your small town played GoldenEye on the N64, for example. There was now an entire website dedicated to exploring and discussing that game that you could join and be a part of if you wanted. And these kinds of connections were awesome. You would start talking and hanging out with people that you would never meet in a million years in real life. You might be a nerdy high schooler from the suburbs who ends up chilling with a bunch of inner city adults from the Bronx because you both went to a Super Smash Bros. Tournament that you found online. The possibilities of what sort of new people you might meet every time you got online were really endless. Now, there were a few different programs and websites that people used to communicate in those early days of the internet. Probably the most common one was just through email and emailing lists. Like some speedrunners back in this era would email each other different times they got, strategies they found, and glitches that they might discover in games that they speedran, since there wasn't YouTube for them to upload that kind of stuff to. Other than email, there was also AOL Instant Messenger, or AIM, which introduced the idea of being able to connect people to private chat rooms where they could talk one-on-one. On top of this, there was also Internet Relay Chat Rooms, or IRCs, which became quite popular as well during this time, serving as a way to connect groups of people who all shared a hobby and wanted to talk about it together. But possibly the king of all these early internet communication options was the forum. Internet forums were somewhat similar to chat rooms, but had some organization, moderation, and were more or less permanent. The way a forum was organized was you would have a front page filled with all the different kinds of topics people could talk about, and then inside each tab you would have a board where people could make individual threads to bring up points of discussion. A thread would be ordered chronologically, where there would be an initial poster that brought up a topic, and then posters who were responded would be laid out below based on who responded first. You could quote earlier responses to talk to a specific person, or just state your own 2 cents to throw out to everyone. Whenever a person posted in a discussion though, that thread would then shoot up to the top of the board to let newcomers know what's been discussed most recently. Now, depending on the forum you're visiting, each poster would have varying levels of customization to a profile that would come up next to every one of their posts. Typically, most forums included profiles with a username, profile picture, post history to let you see how active or new someone was, potentially space for a motto that the person could set, and then later forums introduced links to social media, other websites, and places the poster might want you to visit. On top of this, each poster would also have a signature appear at the bottom of every one of their posts that they could choose to customize in a number of different ways. Sometimes people would just have a few lines of text here, like a quote that they enjoy, but sometimes people would go further and create an entire artistic piece that illustrated that person's interests and hobbies. All of this put together made forums a really interesting place to hang out online, partly because it mimicked real-life conversation incredibly well. Instead of feeling like a tiny speck that's just screaming out into the void that is the internet, you would have a back-and-forth conversation with a number of other individuals just like yourself. It was kind of like talking with a bunch of buddies around a campfire, where maybe it was a multi-way conversation that you wouldn't always get to say much during it, but every person was listening and every other person's voice was heard whenever they spoke. It was also particularly surprising how much it felt like you were talking to real people. Because of the level of customization that a profile and signature gave you, each person felt distinctly unique from one another. You would easily recognize the profile of someone who posted frequently, and you would slowly learn more about them with each post that they made. This built friendships in the same kind of way that you might build a friendship in real life. Even when arguments or debates sprung up in a community, everything was most often done in good faith. People had accounts that they cared about and a face to their name, so this meant that most people wouldn't just say anything for the sake of being argumentative. They would only say stuff that they genuinely believed. Arguments would then end up being taken in good faith more often than not, where both parties listened and responded to each other fairly and accordingly. I mean, you couldn't just tell someone to go and f*** off, you would see them elsewhere on the forum. Don't get me wrong, this is still the internet we're talking about, so there were still plenty of horrible and kind of hilarious arguments that would happen, as are typical for the internet. One of the funniest examples of these was a famous argument on a bodybuilding forum where a few different people couldn't agree on how many days were in a week. There was a great video done on this by John Boys, which I will link in the description of this video, along with the thread itself. So obviously not every forum was perfect, and similar to today, there were plenty of communities that were less fun to be a part of compared to others. But if you found a good group of people to hang out with, it was an incredibly rewarding experience. Sometimes that was a clan or guild for an online game that you would chill with and discuss goals, achievements, and strategy alongside. But sometimes it was just any random group of people you might find where you could ask for help about real life problems. This old news report was done on a father whose son was diagnosed with leukemia, and how a friendly group of forums helped him get through an incredibly tough time in his life.
I think we're moving into an era where these computer communications can connect us with people across all kinds of boundaries in ways that we were not able to connect before.
As the years went by and we moved into the late 2000s, internet speeds became faster and faster, and as the technology and reach of the internet grew, so did its features. Soon we had Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, Facebook. We had places to stream movies, watch videos, there were TV shows, music, fan-made things, and all sorts of other pieces of content that you could now use the internet to consume. This is obviously a really cool thing. However, it's a bit of a shame that all of these new features came at the expense of the old features. Reddit is a great website that personified the shift in what we had with the old internet habits compared to these new ones. First conceived by two college kids who wanted to start what they called the front page of the internet, Reddit served as a website that would aggregate content for communities so someone could have a one-stop shop for all things related to their hobby. This obviously exploded in popularity. Reddit is currently currently the 21st most popular website in the world and the 6th most popular website in the United States. Reddit really expanded as quickly as it did because it fixed a lot of the old issues that forums had. Communities were easier than ever to find and join, whereas before, you had to scour the entire internet to find a forum, and even if you found one, there was no guarantee that that forum would have any amount of quality. Whereas now, every hobby and interest had its own separate community on the same website, making it easy to get connected with all of them at once. There was also a voting feature that a community could collectively use to choose what kind of content everyone thought was worth looking at. This was interesting because content filtration like this didn't exist on forums. On forums, things were just organized based on who posted in a thread most recently, so there were exploits to that. I mean, a person could just continuously post in their own thread over and over until it gets more traction if they really wanted to. All of these things put together got Reddit so successful that it essentially killed most forum communities, even though Reddit's not really a board that's about discussion. See, discussion on forums was really involved because it felt like you were talking with other real people due to all the personalization, where Reddit removed almost all of that personalization to have a much cleaner interface. Rather than being about discussion, Reddit is much more about content. The focus of Reddit is being able to find videos, pictures, articles, and funny responses that people have surrounding a certain topic. The discussion around subjects is really something that comes secondary, and oftentimes it's not really worth partaking in because of how the voting system works. See, on Reddit, everyone can vote on every thread that's brought up as well as every comment that's made. This is what's meant to filter out bad content or irrelevant discussion that you might find on something like a forum, but it also leads to a bit of a problem where hive minds spring up. A hive mind, of course, is just a collective of people who all think and behave in the same way, but it's not just that. Because they all behave alike, any new ideas that are presented to them are just rejected. This means what amounts to discussion on Reddit is often just, does anyone else feel this way? Yes. This is kind of sad because Reddit still aims to be a replacement for forums and serve as a discussion board in theory, but this system has some hilarious and frustrating consequences. One of the funniest examples of this was about 4 years ago. There was a thread in the League of Legends subreddit where the discussion of champions dashing over walls was talked about. Now in League, a champion can dash over a wall if their dash ability will take them all the way over. If they can't clear the entire wall with their dash, instead the dash will just place them on the side of the wall they're coming from, essentially not really moving them at all. However, one champion named Yasuo has a really weird dash ability where his ability always moves him a fixed distance no matter what, so his dash has a quirk where he can dash through a wall if his dash would place him at least 50% of the way through it. That's because his dash is a fixed distance, so if he's dashing into terrain, the game will place him on whichever side of the wall is closest to his fixed dash ending point. Anyway, in this old Reddit thread, some guy said, if you dash into a wall and are further than 50% of the way through it, it will place you on the other side. This is incorrect. A friendly Master Yi player tried to explain, no, only Yasuo has that interaction. And for some reason, Reddit just decided to downvote the shit out of him and flame him nonstop. No, all other dashes work this way too. Not true, this guy is mislead. Trindamir's spin is technically categorized as a dash and works this way too. That is incorrect. At least 25 different people would all gang up on this guy and downvote him, even though he was correct. I'm not sure why the Reddit hive mind was so confident he was wrong. Anyone who's played even a little bit of League of Legends probably knows he was right. But imagine if this person, who is again stating a literal testable fact, can get suppressed and harassed because a hive-minded sub is just uneducated about how a game works and disagrees with him for whatever reason. Then imagine how much worse it's gonna get when it comes to debatable opinions. Religion and politics and news and even gaming controversies. In those sorts of circumstances, anyone who says anything remotely against the hive mind of a subreddit will be met with way more fire and fury than Master Yi. Ironically, this ends up meaning that some of the most debatable subjects in humanity, when brought up on Reddit, will have the least debate possible. just a bunch of like-minded people agreeing with each other. When it comes to communities on Reddit, people are never there to actually discuss subjects, and Reddit really isn't a discussion board. It's a place for fan clubs of various things. People who don't want new ideas presented to them, and certainly not a place where people want to talk about topics in a back and forth setting. It's just for people who want to endlessly consume the same content over and over. And ultimately, this is how the internet moved as a whole. It's no longer about making connections with people across the globe or having new experiences with communities and topics you aren't familiar with. Instead, it's about experiencing the same content repeatedly. YouTube is a site that does this very well. Not only are the comment sections on YouTube atrocious, but YouTube hasn't even bothered trying to fix them or give many opportunities for connection. I mean, they've even removed opportunities like the private messaging ability. Instead, they're constantly just trying to come out with new homepage designs and trending tabs and suggested videos to show you stuff that it's sure you're gonna like. Even worse though is probably Twitter. The desktop part of Twitter isn't bad about this, but on mobile, you don't even see tweets from people you actually follow. Instead, you see an algorithm that curates suggested tweets that Twitter thinks is content you're gonna like. This is a series of screenshots that's just from me logging onto Twitter this morning, and look at this. Every single tweet I'm being shown is something that this person favorited, this person replied to. None of these are from people I actually follow. Even when I do get regular tweets from people I follow, they're curated as things Twitter thinks that I'll like, that I missed. And even further down, tweets from people that I follow are out of order and from hours ago. This isn't even mentioning all the other ways Twitter is constantly telling me what I should be talking about and what it thinks I'm gonna like. The trending topics, here are some moments. Join the discussion of everyone agreeing that this politician is a bad person. Why does the internet keep doing this? It just keeps showing me stuff over and over of people agreeing with each other, suggested videos it knows I've already seen. Let me find new people to follow on Twitter and show me their tweets instead of all this garbage. Let me see the people I subscribe to on YouTube. Why do I have to click the bell to actually make the subscription work? Look, I love the internet and all of the new features it's brought us over the years. Sites like Netflix, for instance, are just flat out amazing. It's so cool how convenient plenty of services have made it for us to consume content from stuff that we know we like. But I don't want to just rewatch The Office over and over and over for the rest of my life. As much as it can be cool to re-experience things I know I like, that's not the coolest part of the internet. The coolest part of the internet is being able to experience things I wouldn't have been able to experience without it. Meeting new people I never would have met in a million years in real life. The internet is this amazing tool for those sorts of things, but avenues that allow you to do that have just been dying more and more over the years. If there's a bright side to all this, it's that there have always been some places willing to take up the torch as forums have died and lead the way in terms of giving you options for building communities and talking to other people. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, it was Ventrilo and TeamSpeak, but more recently it's been Discord. Discord is actually a great place to make connections and build communities together, but it's not everything. Discord is no more a replacement for the internet forum than old chat rooms and IRCs were, and I just wish sometimes that the forum didn't have to die. Nowadays, more people are connected to the internet than ever before, and there's probably people all over the world watching this video right now. But even though there's more people out there than ever, it feels harder than ever to really get to know them and make a real, genuine connection with other individuals. We're all just being drowned out by the massive crowd.